ranking the most powerful Tsuchikages. The most powerful Tsuchikages. There's only 4. They didn't have to go through too many rulers over there. The will of stone, as they call it, was strong within the hearts of these, Kage. So they didn't have to change over, who was the Tsuchikage that often. Mainly because of Onoki and him listening to his grandfather, who was, one of the Kages, which is the first or Tsuchikage that I'm talking about. He's at number 4. That was Ishikawa, the first the first Tsuchikage. Goddamn, the first Tsuchikage. He was at the first. He was at the first meeting with the, other first, the first summit, and at that summit, Ishikawa was one of the ones that was present. He had iron in his beard. He used iron. Not iron sand, but he could, iron stuff. But he also had the light-weighted boulder jutsu, and he could also make shit heavier. Lighter, heavier, depending on, how he felt. He could make himself float. He knew it was a land of iron and everything else. He was the most powerful ninja at that time, and that's why he was the first the first Tsuchikage. And Mu was there, by his side, watching and everything else. As things happened and unfolded, they got possession of the 5 and 4 tails. Those were their tail beasts that they had to eat cost to, and keep. And, they did, they kept them at, in the village, so other people couldn't use their power and other things. Now, he reigned for probably not too long because he was an old man already when he came to power. But he was the grandfather of Onki, the fence sitter, and great-great-grandfather of the 4th Tsuchikage called Kurotsuchi, who's at number 3. Kurotsuchi is, like I said, the great-great-granddaughter of the first Tsuchikage and the granddaughter of Onoki, the 3rd Tsuchikage. He, or she, my bad, was in the 4th Great Shinobi War. She, tried to attack Kabuto when he came to try to snatch Naruto, or they thought he was. But he got away and he took Yamato. She knew how to use lava release. She also, and before I talk about her, Ishikawa, low-key, I didn't know this, but he knew how to use, certain like Aberame clan jutsu. He could use, bug jutsu. I don't know how or what, but I think it was like part of his clan's lineage. He had learned something from the Aberame clan, and he had that as in his bag too. But he's still weaker than Kurotsuchi because she has lava release. She was in the 4th Great Shinobi War, and she was support in that war. She wasn't the most powerful or anything like that, but she was one who had a Kekkei Genkai. All the other people, really, they didn't have Kekkei Genkais. There was, she was a part of the, I don't know if she was a part of the, Explosion Corps, but she knew of Datara and the other guy who got brought back in Miku. But she, did her part during the 4th Great Shinobi War. Wasn't of, any great help, but like at that time, after Onoki, had to sit the fuck down because he was too old, and he just couldn't do it no more. Like the paperwork and everything was too much for him. She then said, "Okay, Grandpa, I'll take over," and she did. And when she took over, she helped fight against the Otsutsuki, that came down from above, and they were, fucking around with, Kinshiki and the other guy. Momoshiki was there too. They're fighting against him, but she did that. She fought against Otsutsuki members, and she's currently the 4th Tsuchikage. Rock style, lava style, Kenjutsu master, Taijutsu. Trying to remember what the fuck I saw about her. She did something else. she's a Kenjutsu specialist too on the side. But that is her. That's Kurotsuchi, the fourth Tsuchikage. And then second is Onoki, the fence sitter. See, Onoki, the fence sitter, had a long reign as Tsuchikage. He took over after Mu died. When Mu died, he took over. And he knew about the Will Stone because of his grandfather, and he was there for a long time. He saw all kind of shit happen, right? He had, I guess he was the one who cleared the explosion for, Datara and this other guy. These guys were good at detonating shit off and keeping people at bay during the Ninja Wars. But like even before that and shit, right? But he had to protect the village from, invaders and other things when Mu died and everything else, and he was there. They couldn't fuck with him. He had the light-weighted boulder jutsu like his grandfather did. He used rock style, but he also used a keke toda. He learned that from the previous Tsuchikage, particle style, but he wasn't as good. But he became better at it as he, advanced in years and everything else. And so he was powerful enough to keep people at bay. The Jinchurikis, though, of his village, Han and Roshi, ended up, becoming Roche Nobi or whatever, getting away from him, and, he kind of, worried about it because, there's hunters out there called Akatsuki members. These guys are, doing their own thing. That guy had, lava release, and Son Goku inside of him, that being Roshi, and then Han had the steam release. More or less. Those niggas were in the village and then they weren't. So he was like worried about power and other things. The third generation, like I said before, was ones that reigned longer. These people developed white hair. Except the third Kazekage and the third Mizukage. They didn't live long lives. The other three did. But out of all of them, Onoki was there still. Even after Hiruzen died to Orochimaru, and then, the third Raikage died fighting in a battle against his own people. Against not his own people, not his people, but, Onoki's people and some other ninjas, 10,000 of them, fighting against the third Raikage. So he had staying power, and he was there. Onoki was there 5 Kage Summit, and he was like, I probably wouldn't be picked because I'm too old. All of you guys are young and shit. You wouldn't want me eating costs and shit like that. Being like the Supreme Commander and whatnot. But then he was sent to go find, Naruto, make sure he was alright, and, Killer B, because the Akatsuki were, flying around. He fought against Datara. He was like, damn, Datara, you were part of the Explosion Corps. Then you left because you, wanted to fuck around and, explode things and, kill people. And you believed your art was this and that, but then he got boxed in and Kabuto took him. And then he also had to fight against Madara Uchiha. It was his responsibility as the Tsuchikage. He was very valuable in that fight because he had seen Madara Uchiha before when he was a young boy. And that, he tried to stop Madara's 2 boulders, or 2 meteors, not boulders, meteors. He caught the one, but then the second one came and it came down on him. But he was like telling the other Kages, this guy uses this type of jutsu, this type of jutsu. But then he was surprised when he popped out with the Rinnegan and also the, Hashirama, cells. And then Tsunade was like, yes, that's my grandfather's jutsu. He's using all this shit against us. Onoki was like, you gotta stand up and, fight. They still couldn't beat him and shit. He wasn't a difference maker too much. Particle style, he tried to use it against Sasuke at the 5 Kage Summit, but Obito was there to save him. He used it against Mu, and he was fighting Mu to, a standstill, a draw. But he used it, because he's known as the Null Man, so he could run away, and get, he can hide his presence and shit. He used the clone to, basically fool Onoki and other things. But that's why I have Mu at number 1. Mu was a better particle jutsu user and he taught Onoki how to use the particle style. He came to power after Ishikawa died and other things. He was at the first summit and other things. He knew that he had to defend the village if the tail beasts from the other guys because they knew about the Raikage and how the Kinkaku unit were doing shit. You know, he died and other things, but then also Gengetsu wanted to come get some from him. They ended up fighting. Keke Todo user versus a Keke Genkai user who was like the best in his village. He ended up dying to this guy named Gengetsu, but he killed Gengetsu too when he was brought back to life. He knew that it was the second Hokage's jutsu. He was knowledgeable on the second generation, people who ruled during his time. He was also good, like known as the Null Man, because he could, hide his presence and people couldn't detect him. The only person who could fight against him during the Fourth Great Shinobi War was the Tsuchikage, Onoki. And he was like, sorry, Onki, you're old now. You can't hold against me. You might have all that wisdom and shit, but you don't have the, physical capabilities anymore. And then he even fooled Onki in thinking that he was, done. But he hid his presence and he went on a run. But then Kabuto took over his body and summoned Madara Uchiha. And then he eventually got boxed in by the Kages. He was, done. But I knew that Mu was like the most powerful because he knew a powerful style and he was the one who used it. He taught it to Onki. Onki didn't defeat Mu. And Onki or Mu, fought against Gengetsu, who was actually one of the most powerful in his village too. I give him the edge though over Onki because Onki is old as fuck. Prime Onki, I still give it to. But if you don't like that take, you can not like that take. Tell me in the comments why you don't like it. But fourth is Ishikawa, the first Tsuchikage. Third is Kurotsuchi, the fourth Tsuchikage. Kurotsuchi, the fourth Tsuchikage. And then Onoki, the third Tsuchikage. And then number one is the second Tsuchikage, Mu. But be cool, corn on the corner. Leave comments.